A silent reckoning is unfolding behind closed marina gates. 4 outboard brands that once defined U.S. boating are now drowning in unsold inventory, failed technology, surging warranty claims, and a dealer network collapse no one saw coming. Legacy names are teetering, pressured by EPA crackdowns and by digital systems that lock out even veteran mechanics. What chain of industry mistakes and mounting crises could erase these giants from showrooms by 2026? And what does that mean for the boaters left holding the keys? Factories ran day and night in 2020 and 2021, chasing a wave of orders that seemed endless, a boom that felt permanent. Outboard manufacturers pushed production lines to their limits, with some plants running at 130% of pre-pandemic capacity. Executives greenlit overtime, expanded shifts, and poured millions into new tooling. By the end of 2021, industry analysts estimated that U.S. outboard output exceeded actual retail demand by as much as 30 to 80%. Warehouses filled with crate engines as manufacturers gambled that the surge would last. Distributors locked in bulk orders, fearing they would be left out if supply tightened further. Dealers, flush with stimulus-fueled deposits, signed aggressive floor plan agreements, betting that buyers would keep lining up for months to come. A marine economist described the period as a textbook demand illusion, a moment when every link in the supply chain believed the boom was permanent. Inventory trackers recorded the highest outboard shipments in 2 decades. Some brands reported record quarters, with sales up more than 40% year over year. Regional depots, once half empty, now overflowed with shrink-wrapped engines stacked 3 high. Manufacturers encouraged dealers to take more units, often tying future allocations to acceptance of larger shipments. The pressure to stock up was relentless, and few questioned the logic while cash was flowing. Yet beneath the surface, the numbers told a different story. By late 2021, unsold inventory had quietly begun to outpace sales. Internal memos circulated, warning of a growing backlog. Still, production lines kept moving, driven by back orders and the fear of missing out. The scale of overbuild set the stage for an industry reckoning, one that would leave tens of thousands of outboards stranded in storage, and a sector dangerously exposed to a sudden drop in demand. Late 2022 brought a sharp reversal. As retail demand dried up, the mountain of unsold outboards became a liability that could not be ignored. Prices on new engines began to tumble, but the real panic showed up in the secondary market. Auction listings for late-model outboards more than doubled in less than 18 months, flooding platforms like Boat Trader and Craigslist with engines that a year earlier would have sold instantly. Dealers, unable to move new inventory, refused trade-ins, pushing desperate owners and repossession firms to offload engines at whatever price the market would bear. Wholesale lots at marine auctions set records quarter after quarter. By early 2025, some auction houses reported 3 times the usual volume of outboards, with late-model engines stacked in rows, many still in original shrink wrap. The oversupply hammered values. Average resale prices for digital steer and next-gen models fell by 18 to 40%, depending on brand and region. Engines once seen as premium investments were now liabilities, with some lots failing to attract a single bid even at steep discounts. Brokers and analysts tracked the surge with growing alarm. Data from the first quarter of 2023 through the second quarter of 2025 confirmed the explosion. Used listings for late-model outboards had more than doubled, and certain models saw depreciation rates spike to 28% in a single year. Repo companies used to quick turnarounds found themselves sitting on inventory as buyers vanished. The glut sent a clear signal. Dealers and lenders were dumping stock, and the market was too saturated to absorb it. As prices collapsed and auctions overflowed, the calculus for dealers changed. Engines sitting on floor plan loans turned from assets into anchors, each month dragging down cash flow and driving up debt. The inventory glut had triggered a chain reaction, one that would soon threaten the survival of entire dealer networks and push four storied brands to the brink of disappearing from U.S. showrooms. At the height of industry optimism, a bold experiment inside one of the major outboard brands promised to rewrite the rules of marine propulsion. The program, known as Project Trident, pushed digital steering and integrated electronic controls from prototype to production in record time. Former engineers recall late-night meetings where deadlines mattered more than validation and cost targets overruled test data. The goal was clear: launch a next-generation system before the EPA's final compliance window, whatever the technical risk. A confidential memo from the engineering department, circulated in early 2021, warned of a storm brewing beneath the surface. It outlined a scenario where warranty claims on Trident-equipped engines could consume up to 16% of gross revenue if even a fraction of suspected field failures materialized. One R&D engineer, speaking under strict anonymity, described the atmosphere as frantic. "We flagged the actuator failures and ECU lockouts and saltwater trials, but leadership needed a launch. They told us to patch in software and ship the hardware. There was not time for a full corrosion cycle." By the first season on the water, those warnings proved prescient. Digital steering modules failed at rates far above projections, with some units losing calibration or locking up after just a few months of real-world use. Dealers reported a surge in warranty claims, and some regions saw entire shipments recalled before the summer ended. The service networks, already stretched thin, struggled to keep up with the volume of repairs. A single defective actuator or bricked ECU could sideline a boat for weeks, sometimes months, as parts backlogs grew and proprietary diagnostics made field fixes impossible without factory codes. The financial exposure mounted quickly. Internal warranty reserves ballooned, and by the second quarter 2022, the costs tied to Trident alone had peaked at nearly 16% of gross revenue, a figure confirmed by multiple sources with access to company financials. The fallout rippled through the dealer network, straining relationships and forcing shops to reconsider their future with the brand. The gamble on speed and complexity had set the stage for a service crisis that would haunt the industry for years. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, set a hard deadline for outboard emissions, 2025 for new sales, and January 1st, 2026 for all production and imports above 40 horsepower. The mandate slashed allowable hydrocarbon and nitrogen oxide emissions to levels that demanded a total redesign of every major engine line. For outboard brands, compliance was not optional. Internal cost estimates put the price of meeting Tier 3 and Tier 4 standards at $50 to $120 million per brand, with per-unit expenses ranging from $310 to over $1,100 depending on engine size. Across the industry, the annual burden topped $180 million. The scale of the investment was critical. Facing the clock, manufacturers diverted capital from legacy models and dealer support into emissions testing labs, new fuel systems, and advanced electronic controls. Board minutes and investor briefings confirm whole research and development budgets were quietly repurposed for compliance, even as warranty reserves ballooned from earlier failures. Engineers, pressed by management, hired outside software contractors and skipped full corrosion and durability cycles to meet the Environmental Protection Agency schedule. The result was rushed launches, incomplete validation, and engines that would later flood recall lists and warranty claims. The regulatory squeeze left no room for error. Any engine not certified by the deadline would be illegal to sell or import, instantly turning unsold inventory into dead stock. Dealers who were contractually obligated to accept shipments of engines certified as compliant with EPA rules watched consumer demand collapse while crates piled up in warehouses. Legal filings and industry correspondence show some brands considered scrapping or exporting entire product lines rather than invest further in compliance. The Environmental Protection Agency refusal to grant extensions sealed the fate of dozens of models. Brands that once dominated marinas now face the prospect of abandoning the United States market, unable to justify the spiraling cost of compliance on shrinking sales. The emissions deadline did not just raise the bar. It drained cash, forced technical shortcuts, and set the timer on a sector-wide reckoning. Interest rates on marine floor plan loans, once a minor cost, soared past 9% by the end of 2024. For dealers, each unsold outboard became a monthly liability, draining cash at a rate that outpaced any hope of retail recovery. Curtailments, mandatory principal paydowns, shifted from quarterly to monthly, forcing dealers to burn through reserves just to keep inventory on the books. Manufacturer quotas tightened their grip, mandating new shipments, even as showrooms overflowed with engines nobody wanted. Refusal to accept these shipments brought threats of franchise termination, and for many, the risk of losing access to future models outweighed the pain of more debt. A finance manager from a Gulf Coast dealership described the spiral. By late 2023, our floor plan lender stopped renewing lines for Yamaha and Suzuki. Each unsold engine was costing us over $1,100 a month in interest and curtailments. The manufacturer said, "Take your quota or lose your contract." It broke us. We sent the refusal letter that ended a 20-year partnership. Dealers watched as liquidity vanished. Cash that once fueled expansion was now locked in engines aging on the floor, their value dropping with every passing month. Franchise agreements left little room to maneuver. Some shops defaulted, others liquidated at auction, and a few simply walked away, leaving crates behind. The finance trap set off a wave of dealer exits, shrinking the network and leaving entire regions without support. As the floor plan system buckled, the service crisis waiting in the wings would soon become unavoidable. Inside the cramped bay of a small-town marine shop, the reality of the outboard crisis is measured in weeks, not words. A veteran mechanic stands over a digital steering unit, laptop open, error code blinking. The customer's engine has been down since early spring. The part needed, a proprietary shift actuator, will not arrive for another 12 weeks if it arrives at all. The shop owner, juggling a backlog that stretches through the summer, calls the distributor again. The answer is always the same. It is on back order, and there is no estimated time of arrival. But the part shortage is not the only problem. Most late-model outboards now rely on encrypted engine control units, known as ECUs, locked behind dealer-only software. Without a factory login, even routine diagnostics are impossible. Independent shops, cut out by licensing restrictions, watch as more engines arrive bricked by failed updates or sensor faults they cannot clear. For boaters, the cost of out-of-network service skyrockets into the thousands, and warranty coverage does not extend to downtime or missed seasons. The situation is locked down far from the dockside mechanic. In 2025, the average wait for core digital parts reached 8 to 20 weeks across major brands. Service bays overflowed with engines waiting on a single module or circuit board. Mechanics report that failure rates on digital steering and control systems are up by as much as 70% compared to mechanical models. Some shops have stopped accepting new warranty work altogether, overwhelmed by claims they cannot resolve. The shop owner shakes his head and says, "We are not fixing engines anymore. We are just apologizing for them." For thousands of owners, a boat is now just a stranded asset. Engines that once promised innovation and reliability have become hostages to a supply chain and software regime that no one on the ground can control. Mercury, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda, names that once defined the American outboard market, now face a future where continued United States sales may no longer make sense. Each brand carries its own set of liabilities, but all are weighed down by a common set of pressures that have become impossible to ignore, and a real prospect that these familiar names could vanish from showrooms. Mercury built a massive United States manufacturing footprint for boom years, and that footprint has become a fixed cost burden as sales volumes plummet. Internal figures show the Marine division losing money every quarter through 2026 unless a dramatic turnaround occurs. With dealer failures mounting and warranty reserves drained by next-generation control system recalls, the risk of a strategic withdrawal grows with every unsold crate. Yamaha, long a powerhouse in innovation, is now hamstrung by the collapse of its silent current electric project. Hundreds of millions spent on research and development have yet to yield a viable product, and suppliers have quietly walked away from battery contracts. Dealers, left holding unsellable inventory and empty promises, have begun to abandon the franchise. For Yamaha's global leadership, the United States outboard business is no longer a priority, and industry insiders expect a phased exit with parts and service support as the only remaining footprint. Suzuki is even more precarious. With a thin dealer network and shrinking United States market share, the brand has quietly halted new model development. Parent company priorities have shifted to core automotive and electric ventures, leaving marine as an afterthought. Announcements of United States sales cessation are expected by early 2026, with only minimal part supply maintained. Honda's outboard division is a rounding error in Tokyo's balance sheet. As regulatory costs surge and profits vanish, the company is winding down production, letting dealer inventories run dry rather than invest further. Observers anticipate Honda will disappear from United States showrooms before the 2026 season even begins. Across all four, the convergence of fixed costs, failed innovation, dealer attrition, and regulatory expense points to an exit forecast window between fourth quarter 2025 and first quarter 2026. For the first time in decades, the American marine market faces the real prospect of losing its most familiar brands, not to a single disaster, but to a slow-motion collapse driven by forces too large to reverse. A boat owner stares at the numbers. His loan balance reads $15,000. The latest offer for his 2022 Outboard is barely $8,000. The dealer that once promised lifetime support has vanished from the map, and the next authorized shop is 2 states away. He calls for a service appointment, only to hear that his engine's ECU is locked. Without a dealer code, no one can clear the fault. The boat sits idle, another summer lost, payment still due. Across the country, stories like this multiply. Owners who bought during the boom now find themselves trapped. The value of their engines has plummeted by up to 40% in less than 2 years. Lenders, tracking the collapse in resale prices, quietly begin to blacklist entire brands. By late 2025, some banks refuse new loans or refinancing on Mercury, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda outboards. Notices circulate through dealer networks. Certain models are now considered high-risk collateral. A letter arrives in the mail. The lender demands additional security or threatens repossession. The owner's options shrink to none. Online forums fill with desperate posts. Boats for sale at half the loan balance. Engines that no shop will touch. Warnings that even bankruptcy offers no escape from underwater loans. For thousands who once saw their outboard as a ticket to freedom, the reality is stark. They are left holding the debt on engines that cannot be sold, serviced, or even started. The financial fallout lands hardest on those least able to absorb it, as the collapse of 4 legendary brands leaves ordinary owners stranded and exposed. Today, unsold engines fill warehouses, while dealers navigate tightening Environmental Protection Agency rules, locked diagnostics, and shrinking support. As regulators raise the bar and digital barriers mount, the future of American boating hangs in the balance. For every lost brand, thousands face stranded investments and fading options. The next wave on the water may not just be about innovation, it may be about survival.